Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Rory from Miro, the innovation workspace. In this series, we're talking to innovation experts to explore methods, frameworks, and topics that help you and your team build the next big thing. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Colin Duff. Colin is the CEO of Mosaic Innovation and has over 2 decades of experience working in corporate innovation. He's also recently published an extensive guide on jobs to be done theory, which we're going to get into today in the conversation, explaining what that is and how you and your team can benefit. Thank you so much for being here today, Colin. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, I think how we like to start off is just to get a sense of who you are, Colin, like how you came to be the CEO of Mosaic Innovation and what's your journey looked like working in the innovation space?
I was always creative. I studied marketing at university, but I had no concept of a career in innovation as it existed. And back then, 20 years ago, it wasn't common. I joined a very traditional big energy company, so traditional and conservative. I used to wear a chalk striped suit. That certainly marked me out. I'm ashamed to say I thought I looked very smart. Really, their approach was extremely like almost a manufacturing company where it was starting a big business case, Six Sigma, Prince 2, all these kind of things. I look back, I never use any of that stuff now. And then I met one time, I always felt like a square peg in a round hole trying to do these crazy things in this traditional organization. And these crazy consultants come in with their fancy clothes and a brainstorm that blew my mind and just approaches. I left and joined a company called What If, who it was like an ad agency style culture, and it was all about building energy and creativity. And then I realized at the time, though, they didn't really do digitally meaningfully. So I went over and ran the innovation team at Argos, which was pioneering kind of lean startup and agile methods. And then I got asked to join Deloitte. They were setting up a venturing team, which was fascinating. And then I decided I wanted to have a go at entrepreneurial, but I'm not ready to take that jump yet. I joined a little tiny boutique to lead their tech practice. And for the last 5 years, I've been running Mosaic Innovation. We do insight-led innovation. And my career's really taught me that so many people want to put a box around innovation and say it's just human-centric design or it's just technology or this is the 5-step process. And I'm very much a pluralist. That you want to be a great innovator. You want to have a broad experience methodologically. We'll talk about today about culturally. And in every sense, right, there is no one right way to do innovation. The more theories, methods, and approaches you can blend, the better it becomes. I always find it very ironic, actually, that in innovation, which is all about novelty and individuality, how standardized people approach it. So hopefully we'll remedy some of that.
Yes, 100%. It's probably a good moment to talk about jobs to be done, right? From my experience before joining Miro, I worked in corporate innovation like yourself. And I feel like with jobs to be done, like I read the books, I've read Competing Against Luck, the Clayton Christensen book, and just found myself nodding along to everything that I was reading. But then when it came to actually applying the method in practice, it was, I don't know, I found it a bit harder. There weren't really the kind of resources out there as like a practical guide to showcase like the journey you can go on. But thankfully, you've now published such guide. So it'd be good to talk about why you did that, and maybe if you actually introduce a bit about what the theory is and some of the value that it can bring to businesses as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So jobs to be done is a top 3 innovation method. So design thinking, lean startup, and jobs to be done. But it's fair to say it's still very niche. There's high awareness, but lots of confusion. And I think there's only about 6 books on jobs to be done. There's probably about 6,000 on design thinking in terms of where it is in maturity. But the best way to think about it is it's really a lens to see the world. So it's a mindset and the method. If I compare and contrast it to design thinking and a traditional approach, which I think is the easiest way to understand it, with design thinking, you're typically, if I simplify it, taking a microscope. You're saying, for this segment, tell us what are your pains and gains and how could we improve a product? Now that's great for incremental innovation. It sucks for breakthrough innovation, hence the 80+% failure rate. The reason is that customers just can't really imagine stuff. They can only think of what they've experienced. And also they have no expertise in technology, business model, and all that good stuff. jobs to be done is fundamentally different because rather than looking through a solution lens, we're looking through an outcome lens. What is the underlying motive? So the famous quote that says, customers don't want, or people don't want a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole, right? Because they're a bookcase or they're trying to hang a picture. So when you focus just on the drill, that's when you get into this kind of feature factory. And as I say, it works as a kind of treadmill. And then you miss typically the big disruptions because you're not looking with the right lens. So there's 3 really critical principles of jobs to be done. The first one is that customers hire products to solve problems rather than buying them for features. So if I give you like a super simple example, why do you buy a kettle? Now you ask 9 out of 10 people, they're going to say to boil water, right? But actually that's almost an intermediary goal. You buy a kettle to make coffee. If you look at Nespresso that look through that second lens, $7 billion, that market space is worth double the kettle market. Now, that's a very simple example, right? It's why people are trapped in the features. And then the other one as well is that when we're doing breakthrough innovation, it's often more helpful to look through a jobs lens. So what is this underlying goal than it is to look through a segment persona lens? So what you're seeing is larger enterprises, they're absolutely awash with data, more sophisticated than ever before, but innovation failure rates are stubbornly high. And the reason being the data they're collecting is the wrong type, or at least it's incomplete. So they're masters of description, but complete failures of prediction. They can tell you what someone bought, who they were, and what's all the correlations. But if you ask why, they often don't know. And the famous jobs to be done, simple example is like, why did I buy a Snickers bar? Right? Is it because I'm 40, I'm middle class in this postcode, or I like peanuts? Or is it because I was hungry and I said Snickers? It's against real food, right? Because it's a meal replacement, unlike a Milky Way, which is just a traditional chocolate bar. So again, it's a simple one. And the third one again is jobs that are circumstantial. The context really matters. So a really simple example, the jobs boost my energy. In the morning, I might grab a coffee. In the afternoon, if I'm going to the gym, it's creatine. And in the evening, if I'm going clubbing, it's Red Bull, right? But when you look at most organizations, particularly non-food and drink, they don't catch anything around circumstance or context as well. There are a few other bits, but with that lens, you can fundamentally change the way you innovate, you develop products, customer centricity, segmentation. It's really transformative.
You're not you when you're hungry, Colin. The Snickers example is a good one though, and it gets me thinking that you do see this kind of level of like insight around like the customer need coming through a lot of the time, especially in marketing. That insight that Snickers is not, it's for people who are hungry. It's more than just a chocolate bar. It's serving that purpose. And that's what I feel with Airbnb and campaigns around like live like a local, like specifically like for the kind of product teams and like getting through to that breakthrough innovation that you described. Like, what would you say are some of the kind of steps that you need to take to implement this, like the jobs to be done theory on the ground so that you arrive at these breakthrough innovations with as a higher success rate than is typically enjoyed with some of these innovation projects?
So one of the really powerful tools in jobs surveillance called their jobs map. So this is where we're looking at what is the customer trying to achieve, agnostic of a solution, methods, or technology. So very different than a customer journey map. There's no channel, emotion, touch point, purchase journey, anything like that. And when you start looking through and breaking jobs down and from big job, little job, and micro job. So maybe to give you an example, let's take Miro, right? It's got a broad scheme of virtual collaboration. So a big job might be something like run a remote workshop.
Yeah.
A little job might involve, there'll be dozens of them, invite attendees, present information. And then if we drill down on the present information job, we'll get to some really interesting ones where, you know, I maybe want to, for example, maintain eye contact, which we still haven't solved because I need to look at my camera. The interesting thing about the jobs of why it's so powerful is jobs are stable over time. So if you went back even to the Romans' time, they invite attendees, so there's a consistent job, right? Calendar has solved it for our age, at least some of it, right? So by having those stable targets for value creation, you can actually all see into the future in some ways, which is unique about that method. But the reason I like this jobs map is it just opens you up to a whole new perspective. And with a few months ago, a company that sells cars online, it's a large platform. And they said, we want to double our business. How should we think about it? And you're saying brainstorms this or that. And I said, look, all that good stuff, you'll get 10, 20% growth optimistically. But we created a jobs map and said, currently all you help people do is advertise, and their customer were dealers as well as end consumers. What are all the jobs and stages involved in selling a car? If you want to double your business, you should probably double your job, right? Should we be helping car buyers actually manage their inventory? Maybe not. A great example of somebody who's really embraced jobs to be done, they're absolute exemplar, is Shopify. And they could have looked at Shopify and said, we help companies build websites, and that's what they started out. But their job is all around, no, we help companies deliver commerce holistically. So that's payments, machines. They didn't constrain themselves to online either. They said, if it's a business, you sell offline, or what about international shipping? What about inventory management? They've just taken that meta job and improved it in every single way. And it's through that, as I say, mapping out the jobs, give you a completely different view versus your journey map. And it's, you can do that without actually any primary research. It's a great way to start in workshopping people, familiarize with the approach before you need any investment.
And does that, when you're implementing jobs to be done with your clients, do people understand the difference then between job actors and customer personas? And like, how do you overcome, you've given a good explanation there of the difference between a job map and a customer journey map, but yeah, how do you overcome the potential confusion there?
Yeah, it's really variable. So you've got, often if it's maybe an insight or innovation team who's read about it, they know, but their stakeholders might know. And I think there is always a reaction amongst people is, oh, is this another fad? To which I say, no, it's been around for 20 plus years, hundreds of success stories, widely used all these places. But then the other one as well is people say, oh, is it just the 5 whys? And I think rather than try to get defensive about it, unlike design thinking has been around so long now, it's just become default and de facto jobs to be done is still. And I think people also are, well, we'll talk about this later, a bit apprehensive about adding another method, right? They want to keep it simple. But I always say to them, like innovation methods, it's like playing tennis, and each method is like a stroke, like a forehand, a backhand, a serve. And if you can master multiple, they all work together and synergy and make you a better player. It's pretty, no one would say, oh, don't play the backhand, but a lot of times in companies, they're saying, we only really want to look through this lens, and you're missing so much opportunity.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, in your own work, it feels like some methods resonate better with different businesses. Like on that though, like how would you describe how jobs to be done fits with other innovation methods typically? Like you have a useful diagram, I think, in your guide, but yeah, how have you seen it kind of complement design thinking or lean startup or even agile methodologies as well?
So if I give you the simplest way I could describe it as design thinking, it's probably like a microscope, and jobs to be done is more of a telescope. So it tends to be more about breakthrough innovation. And jobs to be done comes in during the strategy, where to play. The reason being because it can actually fundamentally redefine how you think about a market, because you're innovating around the job rather than the product. So that's why it's simple to get in early. So you think of a slightly trite example of what business was Kodak, and they think we're in the camera business, when maybe if they'd thought about we're in the sharing memory business, which jobs to be done would have given them further. And then there's overlap when you get in between design thinking and jobs to be done on the customer problems. Now, jobs to be done stops the insight phase. It doesn't give you any guidance on ideation per se. But what jobs to be done also does as well is with design thinking and empathy, your understanding of the customer needs typically is quite high level. So I meet many organizations that say, yeah, we understand the needs, People really want convenience. Value for money is really important. Choice, which, yes, directionally useful, but a bit like trends, it's not always very actionable. What Jobs to be Done really does is it takes it down to the granular. So when we actually start exploring the big job, little job, micro job, what we'll do during the interviews is we'll look for what are the outcomes. So these are very specific metric-based calculations of the customer needs. And there's often dozens or even 100 plus. And that's really the power in the method, is that by getting granular, you can change the innovation target from a bit like firing a machine gun, hence the high innovation failure rate, to almost more like a sniper rifle where you can micro-target underserved customer needs.
And on that, do you see like AI playing a role in being able to almost do even better targeting? I don't know how to carry an analogy there as maybe a laser. Here's the next. Is that AI right?
I'm a cyborg, right? I'm using AI every day for hours every day. So it's absolutely invaluable, because what we start with in Jobs, but the best thing I mentioned, the jobs map, we map that out before we interview customers, because we use that as almost a navigational tool during interviews. So it can expedite and augment that, because however space, if you ask it, and the way to do it, I think Gemini is probably about the best of the LLMs, is you need to just specify what method you're using. This is red flag in the guide. And then it can also, when it comes, I was working with a big tech company recently, and they were saying that they were taking all of the insight from the customer interviews, but then they were using AI to see if anything was missed, because what they were then doing is quantitatively validate it within customers. So in one sense, as long as you're closing the loop, it doesn't matter whether the insight is customer or synthetic, as long as it's being validated. So there's quite a lot of structure, and syntax is really important in Jobs to be Done. And that's where AI can really help get stuff where it might be poorly articulated in a workshop or in post-its, and say, put this into the correct formulation, or we've got a big job, help us drill down what would unpack the little jobs. And it can just reduce the cognitive load, but I wouldn't blindly follow it, because it does get it wrong. You really need to know what you're doing. And I would never recommend just doing synthetic insight, because you'll get a kind of average view, whereas the real world is much more messy, and you definitely will not get the context, which is particularly important Jobs to be Done. So it's an expediter, an augmenter, but not a replacement for insight.
Looking through your guide is a brilliant explanation of the theory, but also has like lots of practical steps and templates. Some of these are going to live in the Miroverse as well, which is super exciting. But thinking about someone who, say, has read about Jobs to be Done, they want to introduce this to their business, but it's not been introduced before. What would be your first kind of piece of advice for a practical first step to introduce this? Is there a kind of tool or a method within Jobs to be Done that you've seen that is the place to start? Like, it's the thing that can bring value quite quickly.
The good thing is, because it's only qualitative insight, it's quite cheap to start a Jobs to be Done process. You can do it with as little as 8 user interviews. So say, look, let's pick a topic in innovation territory. Let's look through this lens and see, can we get to some new places? The one piece of advice, biggest mistake I see people make in Jobs to be Done, is they say, oh, that sounds great. So we're doing interviews anyway, so let's just do the Jobs to be Done in design thinking. Now, there's a little bit of an oil and water, right? Because if you've only got an hour with someone, and one of the views is all, tell us about your pains and gains and what features do you want? And one of them is, let's zoom really out and try to understand your underlying motives and your context. There isn't time to do that. And it just is, it screws with your head as a consumer or as a researcher. They need to be done separately, right? So never go with, well, we'll just do what happens often at enterprises and we'll compromise and do a hybrid approach that really doesn't work.
That is, very helpful. So in terms of getting started, it's based on qualitative data. So it's quite easy to set up and test it with something internally. Where's the best place Where's place people need to go to get hold of your guide, Colin? I'm sure we can link to it.
Yeah, it's on our website. You can download it. It's mosaic-innovation.com/downloads, and you just give an email and it's there. We don't spam. So yeah, it's about 120 pages. So it is step by step. And just one bit I'd add to it is jobs to done. It's quite a lot to get your head around, but you don't need to adopt it holistically. You can start with just applying bits of the mindset in a traditional process. You can take out specific tools like the timeline or just the outcome statements. It's qualitative. There's also a quantitative element, which you can do, but you don't have to do. You can stick with qualitative. So don't be overwhelmed and put off that, oh, it's just too much. Just start small and you can get value from it immediately.
Amazing. And we're going to be putting some of your templates into the Miroverse as well. So people can go through the jobs to be done process on Miro in a kind of centralized place. Maybe we can think about how AI can play a role there in some of the ways we discussed in this conversation. But yeah, thank you so much, Colin. I have learned a lot myself. I feel like you've done such an amazing job of explaining something that sometimes causes a fair amount of confusion and distilled it into a simple, practical thing that people can actually just get started with easily. So thank you for doing that. And thanks for joining us today for this conversation.
Thanks for your kind words, Rory. It's been a pleasure.